All right, you guys. Well, I'm going to go ahead and call our Sandy Urban Renewal Board meeting to order. With that, Jeff, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Councillor Petzold.
Here.
Councillor Smallwood.
Here.
Councillor Sheldon.
Here.
Councillor Walker.
Here.
Councillor Exner.
Hello, I'm here.
Councillor Hokinson, I don't see yet. Chief Schneider.
Here.
Executive Director Jones, I don't see yet either. And Mayor Pulliam.
Here. Thank you, Jeff. And if either one of them show up, let's go ahead. And there's Don. Let's go ahead and just count them as present. And so we have two items on our agenda for this evening for this Urban Renewal Board meeting. First is our approval of the minutes from our March 8th meeting, and then a work session where staff will provide us with a presentation on just kind of our urban renewal budget and different projects and past, present, and future. With that, let's go ahead and go to our approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to adopt the minutes?
The motion that we adopt the minutes from March 8th. Was that right?
That's correct. Thank you. All right, see a second. So there's a motion from Councillor Sheldon and a second from Councillor Walker to adopt the minutes of the Urban Renewal Board meeting from March 8th. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye or give me a thumbs up. Aye. Opposed, a nay or a thumbs down. Motion carries. Great. Moving forward into our work session for urban renewal. Jordan, do you want to kind of start us off here?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. Good to see the Urban Renewal Board back together. We also invited our budget committee tonight to listen in on this work session. And really the purpose was to sort of lay the foundation and kind of the background information going into our Sandy Urban Renewal Agency budget. Some of this information shared tonight will be nothing groundbreaking or new for some of you, but we do have a number of new budget committee members and new counselors that we felt like it was probably prudent to do this sort of foundational work, do a little Urban Renewal 101 and talk more about the next steps in this effort that we're doing with the prioritization of projects and developing Urban Renewal Capital Improvement Plan. So we've engaged with Elaine Howard, who's here tonight to give the presentation. She's worked with the city of Sandy before. I think a couple councilors or Urban Renewal members will recognize her. And we've also engaged with Tiberius Solutions to help develop a tax increment financing and financial plan for the agency and updating that work. So that will be forthcoming. But Elaine will be doing a 101 of urban renewal. So we'll cover sort of the basics of urban renewal, what it is. She'll do a much better job than I've done in the past, I'm sure, in trying to explain what tax increment financing is. And I think that's going to be helpful for the budget committee and going into our budget committee meetings. I believe we have May 3rd scheduled for the Urban Renewal Agency budget. We'll also talk about some of the projects that other communities have done, and I think this will be helpful in the board coming up with those projects that may be fit within that criteria that we've talked about in terms of return on investment and increasing the value of the district, spurring more private development. So Elaine will give some examples of those projects. She'll welcome questions throughout. I think there's a slide presentation that's been linked to the agenda now that you can view if you would like to do that independently, but she'll share her screen. And if you have questions throughout, I think if we use the raise hand feature, probably be easiest for us to facilitate that. And we'll have a couple slides too, talking a bit more about the next steps in this process. So I'm happy to introduce Elaine, who's going to be going through the slides and doing this presentation tonight. Probably a lot of information for an hour, but I think it's going to be helpful in making better use of our time with the budget committee meetings coming up.
Hi, everybody. I am Elaine Howard. As Jordan said, I have worked with Sandy before. I really enjoy working with Sandy. I live in Portland, but I have a house in Bend, and so I pass through Sandy often and enjoy seeing all of the progress that you have done over the years. What we're going to cover tonight is what is urban renewal and why use it. Just a quick urban renewal 101, talk a little bit about the Sandy urban renewal plan, review some of the projects that you're doing, and talk about projects in other cities. So I go through this pretty quickly, but as Jordan said, if anybody has questions, feel free to raise your hand. And obviously I've built in some time that we'll have time at the end, depending on how many questions we have in the middle. So some of this may be repetitive, and I'm sorry for those where it is, but everybody tells me that they always learn something new when they hear it, so I'm hoping you will too. So basically, how urban renewal works is off of increases in property tax revenue in a specific area. So the way Oregon's property tax system works is increases in property tax revenue typically go to all of the different taxing jurisdictions. So City of Sandy, the county, the school district, the fire district. And those property tax revenues increase for two reasons. One, off of a 3% annual growth limit. So that's the amount that our assessed value in Oregon may increase annually unless there is a substantial improvement to your property or there is new construction. Those are really the only three things that allow your property taxes to go up. The way urban renewal works is if there is an urban renewal area in your city like yours, the property taxes off of the growth in that urban renewal area from the time that it is established go to the urban renewal agency instead of to all of the different property taxing jurisdictions. So at the time an urban renewal area is established, the assessor establishes an overall value for that area, and taxes off that continue going to all the property taxing jurisdictions. But any value increases, the property taxes off of that go to the urban renewal agency for the time period that it is in effect. An urban renewal area functions off of an income source, which is that yearly property tax collections. They have expenses and you develop your annual budget. Those expenses are typically projects, programs, and administration. And there's a spending limit, and that spending limit is a maximum indebtedness. And we'll talk about that more in a couple more slides. But maximum indebtedness is the total amount of money that an urban renewal area can spend on projects, programs, and administration over the life of the plan. There isn't a set duration of the plan. So you might do forecasts for a 30-year plan, but duration is not a requirement in a plan. When a plan ends is when they reach this maximum indebtedness limit. I worked with you in 2015 to increase your maximum indebtedness, so that has been increased from its original amount. When cities decide to use urban renewal, it's usually because there are city goals for which they have no plan in, for no funding source. So there are existing plans, things that they want to do in the city. Maybe there are infrastructure needs, but there is no funding source to pay for that. Sandy is a well-used example of mine of your Sandy style program. It is, to me, a great example of how urban renewal has really improved the face of your city dramatically. Urban renewal may be used as a funding source to bridge a gap in strategic ways. So if you have a developer who wants to develop in your community, but their development is not financially feasible, urban renewal does have the capacity to help participate in that project in some way to end up making the project feasible and get actually built. This just shows another graphic to show how the urban renewal area works. So that bar across the bottom that says to the taxing districts from the frozen base is that tax amount from the time the area is established. Frozen base doesn't mean property taxes are frozen. It just means that's the value of the area at the time it was established. The light blue just shows the amount of increment that happens over time for an urban renewal area. You can see at the start of a new urban renewal area, it's fairly modest. It increases over time because you're getting that buildup of that 3% annually on all of the property within the area, and you're getting taxes off of new construction. When an urban renewal area expires, the property taxing districts are able to enjoy that increased value in assessed value and will receive more property taxes than they did at the beginning, and hopefully more than they would have if urban renewal didn't exist. Urban renewal hopefully increases that value, so all the taxing districts get a bump in the property tax revenue that they receive once urban renewal ends. I sometimes have city council members ask me, why can't we just do that for our own city and just establish a fund for improvements? And the reason is urban renewal leverages your own city tax rate with the tax rates of all of the other taxing jurisdictions. So yes, those taxing districts forego money and they aren't getting their full amount of property tax revenue. They're sending that to you. But you can see on this slide in the city of Sandy, you are 28% of the property tax rate, permanent property tax rate for your values within your city. So that means that you're getting 72% additional money because you have an urban renewal area. So you're able to leverage your money 3 times. The one part that you have gets leveraged by the other 3 parts of the whole. That is why urban renewal is powerful, is you are able to concentrate your money on a certain area of your city for a specific time period and amount to improve that area. This is called division of taxes, the fact that the other property taxing jurisdictions give you money. It does not increase the financial impact to property tax payers. It is an impact on the other taxing districts, except if you have an urban renewal area that was in a certain time frame, and then sometimes there are impacts on some bonds. And I checked just before the meeting tonight to see if your district does impact some bonds, and yes, you do. What that means is the issuing jurisdiction continues to get their full amount of money. They have to make their bond payments, but your property tax payers pay a little bit more because some of that money goes to the urban renewal area. We have fixed that problem. I'd say we, a group of practitioners and consultants have been working with special districts. And in the 2019 legislative session, we fixed that problem so that bonds are no longer a part of the division of tax revenue, but they are for certain existing jurisdictions like yours. Urban renewal funds are listed on the property tax bill of every property in the city of Sandy, not just those properties within the urban renewal area. That is sometimes confusing for people because they'll get their tax bill, they'll see urban renewal on it, and they'll know they don't live in that district, and so they're wondering why they're paying taxes to it. I have about a 10 or 15 minute presentation just on that, so it's very complicated, but suffice to say, measures 5, 47, and 50 caused urban renewal to be calculated and received differently. And there was an appeal through the court system, which established the fact that the assessor must assess through all property tax bills in the city, but it doesn't increase those property taxes except for the bonds. It doesn't increase their property tax rate. It is just a different way to divide out. And again, at some point in the future, if you want me to spend more time on that, I am happy to do that. So again, urban renewal does not provide new money. It diverts money that would go to other property taxing jurisdictions. They continue receiving taxes on the frozen base. They temporarily forego those taxes on growth in the urban renewal area. Many times that growth would not have occurred but for urban renewal. In other words, if those urban renewal funds weren't spent there, those assessed value increases and new development may not have happened. In some areas, we know they wouldn't have happened. Schools and education service districts are treated differently. So there is not a direct impact on schools. And schools are, this is the way a regular taxing jurisdiction's impact is. It's a straight impact from property tax revenues to the taxing jurisdiction. And so we call that a direct impact. For schools, this is what a school funding formula looks like, which is absurd, but this is how school fundings work in Oregon. So urban renewal's impact is on the local property taxing revenues that go into the state school fund. That state school fund is funded by other sources, including property tax revenues. All urban renewal districts across the state impact the state school fund. So whether or not you have urban renewal in your community, there still is an impact on the state school fund. Schools are funded through a per pupil allocation. That allocation does not go down directly because a new urban renewal district is formed. The legislature provides an amount of funding and then they fill that funding need with resources, and property tax revenues are one of those resources.
Elaine, there's a question from Councillor Walker.
Yes.
So can you just kind of like repeat the part about, because I see our property tax bills and it has that line item for that. And I remember calling up the city manager and going, okay, explain to me how it is that I'm not paying taxes towards the tax increment financing district. So just clarify that the folks that are not within the mapped area of the district are not paying into it, but it shows up on their bill. Is that?
Okay, I'm going to hit this a little bit and we'll see how this goes. The assessor every year calculates the assessed value growth within the urban renewal area. Let's say that assessed value growth within the area is $10 million. Then the assessor calculates the tax rate against that to know how much they have to pay to your urban renewal agency. And let's say that is, you guys get quite a bit, but let's say it's just $1 million. So instead of that showing up on the tax bill of the people within the urban renewal area, it shows up on the tax bill of everyone within the city. If you had urban renewal or not, your bottom line taxes paid would not change. It's just that the amount of money is that division of taxes. The amount of money is distributed differently so that the property taxing jurisdictions get a little less and the urban renewal agency gets that amount that's a little less together. And the reason that happened is because measures 5, 47, 50 together put limits on the amount of property taxes that can be assessed in Oregon. And Shiloh Inns filed a lawsuit that said urban renewal had to be calculated within that limit. The court system agreed. The Department of Revenue and the assessors together tried to figure out how to do that. And the only way they figured that they could do that is by taking that division of taxes against all properties within the city, but knowing that doesn't increase your property taxes. So if urban renewal went away tomorrow, your property tax bill next year would be the same as this year, plus that 3%. It's just all of the taxing jurisdictions would get a little more. Clear as mud. Yeah. If we have time later, I have some slides at the end that might help. There are limitations on urban renewal. For a city your size, you may have up to 25% of your assessed value and 25% of your acreage in urban renewal. You could have more than one urban renewal area. So that's total. A lot of cities have more than one area, so areas in different parts of their city. If you have an existing plan, it may not be increased in size by more than 20% of the original plan acreage. That's a hard and fast rule. There's no way to increase that amount. Your maximum indebtedness may be increased by 20% of your original maximum indebtedness as indexed by inflation. You've already done that. If you want to ever do an additional maximum indebtedness increase, you would have to get 75% of the other taxing districts for your permanent rate levy to agree by a resolution of the board to make any increase. In 2019, there were some legislative changes. One of the big ones was to public building projects. This, if you have an existing plan, this only applies to new projects, so not something that's already in your plan, or substantially altered projects. So substantially altered might be, at first you were just going to buy property for a new library, but now you're going to finance the library too. So it's a much bigger project than originally put into your plan. Again, if you already have a project that fits what you're going to do in your plan, like your City Hall project, you don't have to get approval. But if you change it dramatically or you put a new public building project in, you have to get approval of 3 of the top 4. They couldn't make all of this the same, right? So this one's different, but it's 3 of the top 4 taxing jurisdictions. That in your community, I believe, is the school district, the city, the fire district, and the county. And so you have to get 3 of those to agree that it's okay to put that public building project in your plan.
I'm sorry, how many did you just list there? I feel like you might have listed 3, or do we make up one of them?
City,
One of
the
4?
city itself,
Okay,
so the
yeah,
city, the school district, the fire district, and the county.
cool. Thank you, appreciate it.
So these are the general objectives of your plan, and I'm just going to read through these quickly. Jordan's going to jump in a couple slides to talk about projects. The general objectives of your urban renewal plan are to improve the vitality of Sandy's downtown core, to make productive use of land in the urban renewal area, to create opportunities for new development within the urban renewal area, to enhance public safety in the urban renewal area, to provide new public amenities and open spaces, to make improvements to infrastructure, and to implement the goals and objectives of Sandy's comprehensive plan. If you want to do a new project that doesn't meet these general objectives, you could still do that project. You would just also then amend the objectives in your plan. So if something came up and you looked at your objectives and you said, well, these don't meet them, urban renewal law understands that over a 30-year time frame, or however long urban renewal is, objectives may change. And so you may amend these in the future if you need to. Your maximum indebtedness is $67 million, and that's the amount of funds that may be spent on projects, programs, and administration. This is from information from a slide deck put together last summer. So this may be off a little bit, but at that time, the indebtedness remaining was $40,350,000. So quite a bit of money left in your indebtedness. In 2017, you issued a $10 million bond, and there's $2.96 million remaining from that. And I believe the other allocations, Jordan, maybe you can step here and help me. The 3 bullet points below, are those allocations made from that bond?
Yeah, so that bond was to purchase the Cedar Ridge Middle School, and then the fire district got $3.5 million. And then $3.5 million was for the community campus improvements. And so that's basically what's remaining, minus some of the work that we've done on the pool and the community campus planning.
Okay. So on the fire district, in the original plan adoption, I believe the fire district was guaranteed 10% of the maximum indebtedness. And there is approximately $1.4 million remaining in that pledge of maximum indemnity towards the fire district. Urban renewal plan activities fall into these 5 categories: public improvements for your plan, public improvements, preservation, rehabilitation, development and redevelopment, property acquisition and disposition, design plans, and plan administration. Jordan.
Yeah, so this is looking at current projects, meaning in our current biennium, these are the projects we identified for the agency. The community campus was rebudgeted, so we've rolled over those funds. We really haven't spent a lot on additional planning work for the Sandy Community Campus, so there's still that $3 million that's remaining that will roll forward. The grant programs, there's been a big focus on this in the last couple of years. We've expanded the tenant improvement program to include childcare businesses, and then the covered patios program that was added just recently is another big expenditure. We've budgeted amounts for small infrastructure and streetscape projects. Those are more of like, sidewalk improvements, other amenities that are in the downtown. We've underground some utilities, so more of the beautification stuff, and partnering with developments. I think a small example was working with Dutch Brothers to make sure there was a stand to put some public art in, as part of their public improvements. And then the last one, City Hall, that was a plan amendment, I think a few years ago, where City Hall was added as a facade kind of improvement project and kind of fix some of the, blighted infrastructure within City Hall. So really haven't spent a lot there besides the siding that was done a few years ago, and then finally fixing all the plumbing in City Hall, which you notice the water runs clear now, which is a huge improvement for staff and the public there. So those are the current projects. And, we've talked before with the board, and again, a lot of this is new information for the new budget committee and counselors, but how the urban renewal, the good thing about the Sandy urban renewal plan is that it is pretty flexible in general. There's those categories are pretty broad, where it allows us to pursue a lot of different projects under the redevelopment, development, preservation, property acquisition. So we have a lot of flexibility and leeway to achieve our objectives under those activities. And with the community campus already added as a project category, and City Hall, in terms of that public building requirement, the city is in pretty good shape for what's included as projects in the plan. Now, because it's so broad, we've talked about, the need to think about what are actually specific and discrete projects and downtown blocks or particular properties that we want to pursue for a purpose that matches our economic development goals. And that's where, we've talked before about engaging in this work of developing a plan and aligning it with our tax increment projections and our funding plan over the next, several, years and decade, to figure out when we can issue more debt to do some of these projects, whether those projects are going to get us the best return on our investment. Is it infrastructure, building out Pleasant Street? Is it building an attractive recreation and aquatics facility that's going to bring more people into the downtown? Is it acquiring property like derelict buildings and properties within downtown, and then the city kind of acting as the developer or partnering with developers on making those properties more activated and beneficial to the downtown and our redevelopment goals. So there's a lot of ways that we can go with this. And so, like I said, this is kind of the first step, or maybe the second step, in talking tonight with you about the opportunities. And I think Elaine is going to go through some of those other examples of projects that are kind of beyond what we've been doing for years, with a very successful, which I'm sure Elaine uses Sandy for examples to other cities, but a very successful facade program. And what more, maybe can we do for some of these bigger development projects with properties in downtown? I think I'm kind of moved into the next steps there. I did. Okay.
Yeah, and which is fine. So we have I've contracted with the city to help go through this process. So the Urban Renewal 101 is tonight, and then to just take a look at your plan and to help provide information about any limitations that are in your plan that may affect how you want to move forward. And then to just start talking about what projects you've completed and not, and of those that you haven't completed, what you want to complete, what are some potential new projects that you want to look at. While this is going on, Nick Popenick of Tiberius Solutions, Jordan mentioned him earlier, will be doing a financial update projection on the financials. And so we'll be bringing that information back to the agency to talk about prioritization for the future. So as part of your work last summer, you had a prioritization consideration, and these questions come from that. So does it increase the value in the district? What's the readiness of the project? What's a community benefit? Is it a private development, or is it a willing partner? What other funding might be available? Does it achieve the goals of the urban renewal plan? And what's the total estimated cost relative to the district's maximum indebtedness? So it will be fun over the next bit to look at projects and look at them against your prioritization.
We have a question from Councillor Hokinson.
Thanks. Regarding your phases, what's the timing on those 3 phases in the prior slide?
ASAP. So we're doing this.
Is it weeks, months? I mean, when is phase 3 expected to be done?
Phase 2 will be done in a couple of weeks, and phase 3 will be done kind of depending on how quickly Sandy's staff and everybody who gives input provides the input. So that could be another month.
It's probably going to be a few months. You know, one of the things that we want to do, is not bullet here, but is like engage with the Economic Development Committee too on that process. One of the things that we'll probably talk about in phase 2 and 3 that Elaine has brought up, and Nick too, is do we want to think, I mean, I guess, excuse me, take a step back and think more of a downtown visioning process for coming up with projects. I don't know if it's completely necessary if we want to take the time, you know, to go through that versus maybe an abbreviated option for doing some more of the bringing in the businesses and the people, you know, the property owners in the district, and do more of a visioning to come up with these projects that are beyond just facade grants and public facility projects, and kind of help the prioritization of, you know, what projects should we do first? Should we buy, you know, the Smith building and redevelop that? Or should we do Pleasant Street and the community campus as, you know, our first big project, and then wait for the TIF to build up again for bonding another big project? Because we still have $40 million in maximum indebtedness. So there's a lot of projects to do, just a matter of when do we want to do them.
The follow-on question to that, Jordan, is that if we're going to expand this beyond the Urban Renewal Board to economic or other committees, then by all means, I'd love to have the current pool community campus committee involved in that discussion as well, maybe as a separate.
They should be. I mean, as a major project that's already has $3 million, that's still earmarked for that effort.
Set up projects, I think. I mean, yes.
Councillor Walker.
So I was involved in the government camp TIF district, and up there we had a huge amount of, you know, ability and interest from, you know, RLK, you know, Constance, Kirk Hanna, and other developers up there to kind of, you know, invest in the infrastructure up there. And then the TIF district was kind of helped them with costs for sewer and water, things that were required by the county. That's kind of how we supplemented the development with the TIF district. And I'm just curious if you have, I guess I'd be a little hesitant to, you know, restart, or I don't know, I guess I don't know what process you've used in the past, but, you know, unless we see more interest from the property owners there in, putting the money up to develop their property and us, subsidizing that. I guess I'm not sure, do we have an interest from those landowners? I'd be definitely not in favor of purchasing these old buildings. We already have an old pool and an old school and an old gym, and that's enough old crap to have to pay for to deal with as it is. I'd be really hesitant to kind of be buying any more old buildings and being on the hook for fixing those up. But because I think the intent is really that the landowners utilize this kind of bump to help subsidize their new development. Is there interest, or what have you kind of heard from some of the landowners there?
Well, I can say there's at least one property owner that would be interested in selling to the city. I imagine there might be others. Depends on the price. Sometimes my urban renewal agencies buy high, depending on.
I mean developing it themselves. I mean,
Oh.
we can't, we're having trouble just dealing with what we've got with the wastewater and all that. The idea that we're going to go build buildings and develop them,
So there's two different.
So I'm
Point of order. Sorry, just point of order. I think this is just more of an informational work session. I'm not sure we're looking to get into a council discussion on, prioritization of different projects and what we should be doing. We're literally trying to do a review and collect information just to kind of help all of us understand what an urban renewal budget is and the direction that we're going into it. I think there's going to be plenty of time for us to talk about the funding of projects and the details. So if it's okay, I would like to at least proceed on with the presentation, and totally open to debate these things. I'm not trying to shut down debate on it. I just would like to kind of keep us focused.
Thanks, Mayor. I think Elaine will be able to talk about some of these questions too, and the examples about how these work with, the city acting as a developer or development agreement examples.
Right. And that's a great question. And I think you're right. That's something to be grappled with, definitely. So I'm just going to flip through a lot of these very quickly so that we can talk about some of those other things at the end. So what I have here right now are examples of great projects that you've done yourself, just so that people can see. And these are mostly based off of your Sandy style design guidelines. And I think that you've done a terrific job. And like Jordan said, and I said at the beginning, I talk about your city every time I do an Urban Renewal 101, because you've done such a great job. I drove through last winter and saw the Dutch Brothers and thought, hey, this is great. It's in the Sandy style. So good job for all of these great projects that you've done. And you've been very consistent about doing really nice renovations and really nice changes within your community. So, Pete, I'll talk to other communities and I'll say, well, have you been through Sandy recently? And they'll go, yeah, don't things look great? So you should know, you get from all the city planners and people, you get a lot of compliments for what you've been doing. So these are some slides from the city of Albany, where they did, you can see in the foreground on this slide, they did a whole streetscape renovation in their downtown near the historic buildings. And then those building owners came to them and said, we'd like to look at your loan programs to do something to our buildings. Albany talks about the circle of development example. So first they did the streetscape, then this building was done, then the building across the street was done. So they had blighted conditions, they had public investments, they had improved conditions, and then they had private investments within their community. This is the Fort George Brewery in Astoria. You can see from the top slide was a very derelict building at the north end of their urban renewal area. A young couple came in, talked to the city, put together a bunch of different funding sources, with urban renewal being that gap funding to bridge the gap between what they had and what it was going to cost. They developed the Fort George Brewery, which is incredibly successful, not now just in Oregon, but all across the West. They've developed 5 new additional little businesses around here. So the Blue Scorcher Bakery here, and then on the backside, there's a glass blowing business and a couple of other businesses. So this is a very, in addition to just improving the building, it's brought jobs to the community. It's brought different restaurants and services. So it's a really nice example of an urban renewal project. This is in Bandon. It's a Face Rock Creamery. The city's urban renewal agency had purchased this land. It was the former home of a branch of the Tillamook Cheese Factory, but the cheese factory decided not to produce here anymore. They worked with a local developer to develop their own Face Rock Creamery. The city sold the land to the developer, but the city put in the parking lot here, and they put in restrooms and the sidewalk. And the restrooms are maintained by the developer, so that the city didn't have to get into that maintenance part. It's an incredibly successful development in Bandon, and if you haven't been there, you should go. This is in Coos Bay. Jordan, today when we were talking about this, said it's really a 10-story building in Coos Bay. And yes, it is the tallest building in Oregon on the West Coast. It is the Tioga building. It has apartments up above. This is just, the picture I had of the redo wasn't a very good picture. It has just happened in the last year. This is a rendering of what it looks like. It looks great. It's a really nice change to their area. And this was a 50% grant from the city and 50% developer participation. This is another historic building in Coos Bay, the First National Bank building. The city tried for years to get a developer interested. They were unable to get any developers, so it just sat vacant, but it was an historic structure, so they wanted something done. So the agency ended up buying it themselves, did the exterior renovation, resold it to a developer / business owner to be redeveloped on the interior. So by the city getting involved and making people see what it could be, they were able to transform that beautiful building. This is Tualatin project where the city decided to create a town center. It didn't have a traditional town center. It was just mostly a suburb. The city purchased all of the property for housing units, retail, the lake, through individual property owners, and then went out and worked with a developer through a redevelopment agreement that said, you do X and we'll do Y to get that area developed. And it is a nice gathering place in the summertime, but also it provides that civic, that center area for the city. The Lake Oswego slide, I moved to the next one. There are 2 great developments in, Jordan can tell you more about these than I ever could, but 2 great developments in downtown Lake Oswego. The one on the left was done first, and then the one on the right. They both incorporate ground floor retail with either housing on the top or commercial space on the top, with pathways through them. The city developed a parking garage to support these. The parking garage was paid for by the city, but it's maintained by the developer again, so that the city didn't have to stay in the maintenance business. So that was part of the first development. The second development also has some parking within it that's underground. And the same thing, the city paid for the portion of the redevelopment of that parking. Behind these 2 developments is a beautiful park. So the city did that first. So a lot of times doing those public amenities is what will encourage a developer to come in and put in a lot of money. City had to wait for ages for this property owner to decide to go ahead and sell the property. A lot of times I find in cities, smaller cities across Oregon, the property doesn't get developed until somebody's really late in their life and they decide to either turn it over or give it to their children, because they don't want to have to deal with any of that stress at that point in their life. And they aren't ready to figure out what to do with the property. So they just sit there until you can move them on through, usually at end of life decisions. But both of those are beautiful projects. This is a gathering place in Astoria. It's the Garden of Surging Waves that commemorates the Chinese workers in Astoria in the canning industry. So if you haven't been to Astoria recently, I suggest that once COVID's gone, you go to the Liberty Theater and see a show, go see the Garden of Surging Waves, and then walk through their downtown area and see all the great improvements. I was asked to put some streetscape pictures in. Estacada, which is close to you, has done some great streetscape at a lower price point than some other cities have done, and they've done it by partial extensions and less expensive pavers, but it's still beautiful, and like paving on a portion of an intersection instead of the whole intersection. They've had, pre-COVID, they had a lot of interest from business owners for creating new businesses after the streetscape came in. So it's really well done and easy for you to take a look at. These are a couple of examples of Lake Oswego streetscape. So here you can see they put in that angled parking, and there's brick pavers there, but then they also did the street trees and the bollards. So really nice. This is some iron rail detailing along one of the cross streets to just spiff up the area. This is Sisters, and you guys probably don't go through Sisters a lot from Sandy because you go over to Central Oregon over Mount Hood, but it's worth it to come back through Sisters sometime and see the streetscape that they put in. This actually was only funded partially by Urban Renewal. It was funded mostly by ODOT, but it's done beautifully. The signage is really nice. The lighting is nice. Everything is very thoughtful. So this is a storm drainage area for natural runoff. It's well worth seeing if you want to go look at interesting streetscape. Pendleton, I think.
Elaine?
Yes.
Sorry, just a quick question. You mentioned ODOT. What happened? Why did ODOT bring money to bear for some of those projects?
That's a really good question, and I don't know the answer, but I work with their city manager all the time, so I can find out.
Yeah, it'd be nice. I mean, it's probably they had to do something to the roadway, and it was a little give and take situation, but yeah, appreciate that. Thank you.
Yep. Because ODOT comes through your city too, right?
Exactly. That's good. You've read my mind.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think Pendleton has the greatest signage in the state. It looks like the Pendleton Roundup. It has pictures of the Pendleton Roundup in it. It's really terrific signage and fun to see. It's not only directing you to different things, but they have the signage to their businesses also, so it directs people who are walking in their downtown. Site development projects. So these are projects where the Urban Renewal Agency has gotten in and done something. So in Bandon, they demolished the property, the building that was on the property for the Face Rock Creamery, and did the site improvements there. In Lake Oswego, the agency actually purchased both of the properties for those big mixed-use developments, and then turned around and worked with private developers to develop them. Tualatin Commons, the city assembled all of those properties to get that downtown center done. Redmond Airport Industrial Area is one of the most successful urban renewal areas in the state. They went in and put in all of the infrastructure, so the roads, the utilities, and they say if you build it, they will come, and they built it and they did come. And they were able to shut down that urban renewal area much earlier than projected because of all the development came because they had put the infrastructure in. Wilsonville has a really interesting program. It's called the Wilsonville Wind Program, Wilsonville Investment Now. It's an industrial development incentive. It's tied, it's similar, but not duplicative of enterprise zones. So what it does is works with developers and has a rating system for amount of investment, amount of jobs, wages paid. And depending on where you place in the rating system, they will rebate your property taxes for a time period to encourage you to invest in their community. So in this type of program, you don't have to directly use your TIF dollars. So if you don't want to use up your capacity, it still goes against your maximum indebtedness, but it goes against it each year as you're getting that property tax rebate back to the developer. So it's instead of putting money in up front, it's putting money in after all the building has been built, and they get a rebate of property taxes. Now, we just formed this district a couple of months ago. Wilsonville has one application in and another company talking to them about an application. So we're hoping it'll be incredibly successful. I've worked recently on 3 workforce housing urban renewal areas across the state, one in Salem, one in Madras, and one in John Day. Both Madras and John Day are a similar strategy as the Wilsonville program, which is you give the builder money back after property taxes are paid, a portion of that, not the full portion, to provide incentives for development. Both Madras and John Day did not have new housing constructed in the last 10 years, none, because the cost of development did not equal what people could pay for housing. So if a builder built it, nobody would buy it because the cost was too high for the income in that community. So the programs that we designed set up the system to provide the incentive for the developer to go ahead and develop and be able to sell it at a lower price point because they were getting that property tax rebate. The one in Salem is really interesting because if a developer comes to the city with multifamily development, the city can say to them, would you like to take 20%, it doesn't have to be 20%, but let's say it is, of your units and make them affordable workforce housing units. And if you'd like to do that, we'll negotiate terms with you, and the money that the city would be put in is predicated on what property taxes you pay. So it's again based on they build it first, then they get money back. And there is one project that's being developed in Salem right now in this overall program where they did decide to dedicate, I believe, 20% of their units, and they weren't going to do any workforce housing, but they have decided to do this program and dedicate 20% of the units to long-term affordability. So that's an exciting way to try to help make that kind of thing happen. So that's a quick review of lots and lots of information, but hopefully it'll get you excited about something and be able to translate that to your own community and say, gosh, why don't we think about doing X in our community? So we have a few minutes, I think, for questions. 7.
Yeah, 7 minutes. If you don't mind, or whoever's controlling the presentation, take it down. It might be a little easier for us to see. Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, before we let her go, we have some time here. Were there any questions by any budget committee members or city councilors? Jeremy.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate and love the pictures you presented and hearing the stories and knowing, and I've heard many times too, that when people drive through Sandy, know I'm on city council and like, we love what you've done to your town from other government elected officials everywhere else too. One of the things we get to do sometimes as League of Oregon Cities has gone over to Bend for an annual conference And a couple times when we've done that, we've gone to Redmond, and you gave one example in Redmond, but there's so many more examples in Redmond that I'm just so impressed with in what they did for when they did the bypass, the dying street there, to buying the old middle school and making it the new city hall on that, and then just flipping properties, as you mentioned on some of the others. Do you have any sense about their urban renewal besides the airport one that you
Right, they
presented
have a
there?
downtown urban renewal area, and you're right, it's been incredibly successful. They've put that big arch in that says, "Welcome to Redmond." So that's one of the things they've done, but they've participated in rehab programs for many of the downtown buildings, and they've put in streetscape and a couple of housing projects. I don't, if somebody was really interested in any of that, I could pull together information for a future slide. But yes, that downtown area has been incredibly successful in the projects they've done.
And they created a Redmond dollar at one point when it came through, at the very beginning when they bypassed it just come to try to get people to come downtown, and they were using urban renewal money for that. It was explained to me there. So
Don't want to hear that.
it was a buy it from here and spend it here. I don't know. I'm sure they did everything legally,
I'm
but
sure it all went to infrastructure. That's good.
We all do.
but it was very creative, and it really, yeah, it was exciting to see how that transformed in such a small amount of time. And
Yeah.
when we talk about urban renewal years, but thank you very much.
Those Redmond dollars fixing blight all the way, baby. Carl.
Yeah, Elaine, it seemed to me, we talked about this in the past, but remind me, if the city decides to, let's say, purchase a piece of property or a building, get it to a point where it's sellable, and they sell it, and let's just call it a break even, they get money back. Can we put that money into the urban renewal fund again and then use that as to go on to some other projects? Or is that money, once it's spent, need to be put someplace else or can't be put back into the renewal fund?
Different, this is a legal question, and different lawyers have different thoughts on it. So if your existing bond covenants have anything about it in the bond, so that's where you have to look first, your bond covenants, to see if they have any restrictions. There has been a recent opinion for another city I'm working with that said if you use tax increment dollars to purchase it, when the money comes back in, you still have to use the restriction of those tax increment dollars. So that's just something you would have to get a legal counsel on. It can't go back to the city. It has to stay in your urban renewal fund somewhere, but whether or not you have the original tax increment restrictions or not would be something you'd want to work out.
It looks like a piece of, if it's legal, be able to just continually use those dollars, put them into a piece of building, get them ready to go on something that hasn't been used for many years, get it ready, have it sold to somebody else, take that money, put it in another piece
Right.
of property.
And we all remember we can't use them in a domain in Oregon anymore. So there's no condemnation of properties. You can only buy from a willing seller.
Okay, thanks.
Great, thank you. When did that change?
There was a cities can for a public project. So if you're building a new city hall or police station or something like that, or a school district needs to use it. But if you're just doing it to take from one developer to another developer, we passed a statewide referendum on it a number of years ago.
Great. Was that part of 37 maybe?
Yeah, I don't remember I don't remember the exact number.
Jan.
Yes, I know in some investment proposals, arbitrage applies if there's earning of money and it's held for a certain time. Is there arbitrage also in urban renewal?
I suspect so, but I don't do the financial side. Nick Popenick does. And I don't think he does, down to that kind of detail. So I'm sure did you do a bond, Jordan? Is it a bond that you have? So
I think it's a full
whoever-
faith and credit. I think there is the same arbitrage limitations. No.
So it'll be in your bond documents.
Mhm.
Somewhere it'll tell you what the restrictions are.
Mayor Linda had her hand up on the screen, but not.
Oh,
with anything,
okay. Yeah, of
in case you
course.
missed her.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Linda. Unfortunately, Linda, we're not hearing any audio, or at least I'm not hearing any audio from you. You are unmuted, so I don't.
Oh, never mind.
Oh, I
Now,
hear ya. Hey.
yeah, my little red light was on my device here. Ideally, Carl, what you were talking about of investing in a derelict a property and making it, better, and then selling it to a developer and selling it to an investor is great. It makes money, and you can put the money back into the urban renewal. But I think we don't want to create a whole lot of black holes where we're buying property and selling it for a loss. And other people are gaining the benefit of the urban renewal investment and not the city as a whole. That's, I think we've got to be careful with thinking we can recreate it every time. It has to be looked at with a skeptical eye of not planning on losing money, but planning on actually investing and getting more money back from what we invested. And investing that, carrying that on. You can't carry it on if you lose money every time. Just a thought.
Thanks. I think I understood you. You were really rough there for a bit, so I think I got your impression. Thanks.
All right. Yeah, Elaine.
You can put deed restrictions on properties if you like the Tioga building in Coos Bay. If you're putting a lot of money in the property, so you can negotiate, okay, we're going to give you this grant, but if you sell within X period of time and you make a profit over X amount, it comes back to us. So you can put those kinds of provisions in an agreement to protect you from somebody just using your money and making a gain on it and walking away.
So I can think of something where we might want to start being better at that, which I'm not going to say the building, but there's a building I believe did receive some tenant improvement dollars and got a pretty good kitchen and then changed use, and that kitchen's not there anymore. So yeah, it would be nice to be able to put some of these restrictions in, I think. All right, we're right up. We're not up against. We're past now. So is there any other questions, or are we okay with wrapping this up? All right, looks good. Well, thank you so much, Elaine, for your time this evening and your presentation, and staff for all the work put into our meeting this evening. Thank you to the budget committee members. I'm sure we're all going to be best friends here real soon with the time we get to spend with each other. But thank you for spending some time this evening in this work session for our Renewal Board. With that, I will go ahead and adjourn, and then why don't we plan on trying to do a quick break, and we'll start our council meeting at 7:05. Thank you.